The Last Warning. The Galactic Tribunal Hall existed in a state of carefully maintained chaos. Dozens of species occupied their environmental zones, each breathing different atmospheres, experiencing different gravities, perceiving different wavelengths of light. The architects who designed this place 4,000 years ago had been masters of compromise, creating a space where beings who evolved on opposite ends of possibility could meet and negotiate. Ambassador James Morrison stood in the human delegation zone, watching through the transparent aluminum barrier as the Vedrex representatives took their positions. They were impressive creatures, the Vedrex, standing nearly 3 meters tall with scales that shifted between deep purple and black. They moved with the confidence of apex predators. Their civilization controlled 14 star systems and commanded the third-largest military force in known space. Morrison was 58 years old, a career diplomat who had spent the last 20 years navigating the complex social hierarchies of galactic politics.
He had gray hair that he kept military short, a habit from his youth that he'd never quite abandoned.
His dark blue suit was understated, professional, designed to project competence without aggression. He understood that in galactic politics everything communicated something. The chief arbiter, a Thessian whose crystalline body reflected light in hypnotic patterns, initiated the session. The tribunal recognized Fleet Commander Zarthul of the Vedrex Collective. "State your petition." Zarthul rose from his stance position. His voice carried naturally through the hall, deep and resonant, evolved for intimidation. The Vedrex Collective formally claims sovereignty over the 7 human colonies in Sector 447, designated by humans as the Outer Rim territories. These worlds fall within the traditional Vedrex sphere of expansion. We have provided detailed historical precedents demonstrating our prior cultural claim to these regions. Morrison felt his jaw tighten, but kept his expression neutral. The claim was absurd from a legal standpoint. Humans had settled those worlds 43 years ago, during the initial expansion period after first contact. There were no Vedrex settlements, no Vedrex artifacts, nothing but ancient survey data that every species had for thousands of unclaimed systems. The Arbiter's crystalline facets rotated toward Morrison. The tribunal recognizes Ambassador James Morrison of the Human Federation. What is humanity's response to this petition? Morrison stepped forward to the speaking position. We reject the claim entirely. The Outer Rim colonies were settled legally under the Galactic Expansion Accords of 2187. No prior claims existed in the registry. 300,000 human citizens have built lives on these worlds over 4 decades. They have families, infrastructure, entire societies. We cannot and will not simply abandon them. Zarthul made a sound that the translators rendered as contemptuous amusement. Cannot or will not, human. Your species speaks often of choice, of preference, of desire, but you do not speak of capability. We have studied your kind extensively. In your 47 years among the civilized species, you have surrendered territory 6 times, backed down from confrontations 14 times, accepted unfavorable trade agreements rather than risk conflict 23 times. Morrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. This was worse than he'd anticipated. The Vedrex weren't posturing for diplomatic advantage. They genuinely believed humanity was weak. Commander Zarthul continued, his confidence absolute. You negotiate because you must. You compromise because you have no alternative. You say please because you understand your position in the galactic hierarchy. You are a young species. Militarily insignificant, culturally unremarkable, you exist in the spaces we allow you to exist. The human delegation zone went very quiet. Morrison could feel the eyes of his team on him. Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the chief cultural attaché, touched his arm gently. Her voice was barely a whisper. James, be careful. He understands what we're facing. Morrison moved closer to the barrier separating the human zone from the central forum. His voice remained calm, but something in his tone changed. Commander Zarthul, I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to say. This is not negotiation. This is not diplomatic maneuvering. This is a warning. You have studied humanity for 47 years, but you've only studied what we've been for those 47 years. You've watched us compromise and negotiate and say please, and you've interpreted that as our nature. You're wrong. Zarthul's scales darkened, a sign of aggression in Vedrex body language. You threaten us? Morrison shook his head. No, Commander. I'm trying to save you. 47 years ago, when we made first contact with galactic civilization, humanity made a choice. We looked at what we'd been, at our history, and we decided to be something different. We created what we call the Mercy Protocol, a set of restrictions, agreements, promises we made to ourselves about how we would conduct ourselves among other intelligent species. He paused, making sure he had the full attention of not just the Vidrex but every species represented in the tribunal. We say please, Commander, not because we're weak, not because we're afraid. We say please because we remember what we're like when we stop saying it. The Thessian arbiter's facets rotated with interest. Ambassador Morrison, are you suggesting humanity possesses hidden military capabilities? Morrison chose his words with precision. I'm saying that humanity spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We weaponized everything. Physics, biology, chemistry, psychology. We fought wars that killed hundreds of millions. We developed weapons that could sterilize entire continents. We built machines designed for nothing but efficient destruction, and we got very, very good at it. Then we met you, he gestured to encompass the entire tribunal. We met hundreds of species, thousands of cultures, an entire galaxy of different ways of being intelligent, and we decided we didn't want to be the species we'd been. We wanted to be better. So we locked away the weapons. We decommissioned the warships. We restricted our military to defense and peacekeeping. We chose diplomacy over conflict. But those capabilities still exist, Commander Zarthul. The knowledge, the infrastructure, the industrial capacity, all of it. We didn't forget how to make war. We chose not to. Zarthul's laugh echoed through the chamber. Beautiful rhetoric, Ambassador. But words do not stop warships. Your 7 colonies will be absorbed into the Vidrex Collective. We are giving you 10 standard days to begin evacuation procedures. This is our courtesy, our gesture of goodwill, but it is non-negotiable. Morrison felt the weight of history pressing down on him. He thought about the bunkers deep beneath Earth's crust, the sealed vaults on Mars, the mothballed shipyards in the asteroid belt. He thought about the protocols that hadn't been activated in nearly 5 decades, gathering digital dust in secured archives. Please don't do this, he said quietly. Please reconsider. We're asking you, begging you. Don't make us remember what we were. The Arbiter spoke with formal finality. The Galactic Tribunal will review the presented arguments and issue a judgment within 3 standard days. This session is concluded. Morrison returned to his delegation zone. His team surrounded him immediately. Sarah Okonkwo looked worried.
James, do you think they'll listen?
He shook his head slowly. No. They've already decided. They see 47 years of peaceful behavior and think that's all we're capable of. They don't understand that it's a choice, not a limitation. Commander Michael Torres, the military liaison, leaned in. Do we need to contact Earth Defense Command? Morrison pulled out his secure communicator. The device was deliberately archaic, using quantum-encrypted channels that predated first contact. He entered a series of codes that he'd memorized decades ago but never expected to use. We need to speak with the Security Council, he said. All of them. This is about to get very bad, very quickly. 3 days later, the Galactic Tribunal issued its judgment. In a decision that shocked most observers, they ruled in favor of the Vidrex Collective. The historical precedent, while thin, was technically valid under obscure clauses in the expansion accords that predated human membership. Morrison received the news in his office aboard the human embassy station, orbiting the tribunal world. He read the judgment 3 times, hoping he'd missed something, some loophole or exception. There was nothing. Sarah Okonkwo entered without knocking, her face pale. They're mobilizing their fleet. Long-range sensors show 300 Vidrex warships assembling at their forward staging bases. They're not waiting for us to evacuate voluntarily. Morrison activated his secure communicator. Get me Director Walsh at Earth Defense Command. The connection took several seconds to establish, routing through multiple relay stations. When Director Catherine Walsh's face appeared on the holographic display, Morrison could see the tension in her expression. She was a woman in her 60s with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd spent 40 years in military intelligence. Jim, she said without preamble. Tell me we have options. We don't, Morrison replied. The tribunal ruled against us. The Vidrex fleet is mobilizing. They're going to take the Outer Rim colonies by force. Walsh was silent for a long moment. How much time do we have? Based on their fleet movements, they'll reach Epsilon 7 in 6 days. The other colonies within 2 weeks. Morrison watched Walsh's face carefully. He'd known Catherine for 23 years. They'd worked together during the transition period after first contact. when humanity was figuring out its place in galactic society. He'd never seen her look this grim. "I need to convene the Security Council," Walsh said. "This is beyond Defense Command authority."
"But Jim, you understand what this means?"
"If we respond militarily, there's no going back. The Mercy Protocol has kept us at peace for 47 years. "I know," Morrison said. "I tried everything, Catherine. I warned them. I practically begged them to reconsider. They wouldn't listen." Walsh nodded slowly. "I'll initiate the emergency protocols. Stand by for further orders. And Jim, you did everything right. This isn't on you." The connection terminated. Morrison sat alone in his office, staring at the star field visible through the viewport. Somewhere out there in 7 different systems, 300,000 humans were going about their daily lives, unaware that everything was about to change. His communicator chimed again. This time it was a priority alert from Epsilon 7, the closest of the Outer Rim colonies. Morrison activated the channel and found himself looking at Governor Lisa Yamamoto, a woman he'd met twice at diplomatic functions. "Ambassador," her voice was steady but strained. "We're picking up Vidrex warships entering our system. They're not responding to hails. They're just coming." Morrison felt his hands clench into fists. "Governor, initiate evacuation protocols immediately. Get everyone you can to the transport ships. We have 40,000 people on Epsilon 7, Ambassador." "We can't evacuate everyone in 6 days, then get as many as you can," Morrison said. "Prioritize children and elderly first. Defense Command will send support, but you need to start now." Governor Yamamoto's image flickered. "Ambassador, what's happening? Why is this happening? Because we spent 47 years being peaceful and they mistook it for weakness." Morrison took a breath. "I'm sorry, Governor. I tried to prevent this." The connection remained open for several more seconds. Morrison could see the fear in Yamamoto's eyes, the realization that her world was under threat. Then she straightened her shoulders, pushing the fear down. "We'll begin evacuations immediately. Epsilon 7 out." The image vanished. Morrison stood alone in his office, watching the stars and waiting for the Security Council's decision. On Earth, in a bunker buried 3 kilometers beneath the Rocky Mountains, the Security Council assembled for the first time in its emergency configuration. 15 members representing the major governments and power blocks of humanity. Director Walsh stood before them, her presentation already loaded. "The situation is critical," she began. "The Vidrex Collective has rejected all diplomatic solutions and is proceeding with military annexation of our Outer Rim colonies. Based on current fleet movements, they will attack Epsilon 7 in approximately 6 days. Secretary General David Afolayan, a tall Nigerian man who'd led humanity's civilian government for 8 years, leaned forward. "What are our military options?" Walsh activated a holographic display. "The Outer Rim colonies have minimal defensive capabilities. They were never intended as military outposts. Under the Mercy Protocol, we restricted all colonial military assets to light patrol craft and emergency response vessels. Then we're defenseless," someone said from the back of the room. Walsh's expression hardened. "No, Counselor. We're not defenseless. We're restricted. There's a difference." She brought up another display, this one showing data that most council members had never seen before. Under the Mercy Protocol, we decommissioned 97% of our pre-contact military infrastructure. But we didn't destroy it. We mothballed it. Everything still exists. The weapons, the ships, the production facilities, the tactical databases, all of it, stored and maintained in sealed facilities across human space. The council chamber erupted in conversation. Afolayan raised his hand for silence. "Director Walsh, are you suggesting we suspend the Mercy Protocol?" Walsh met his gaze directly. "Mr. Secretary, I'm saying that the Mercy Protocol was created to give us a choice, to allow us to be something better than our history. But it was never meant to be a suicide pact. If we allow the Vidrex to take our colonies without resistance, we're not choosing peace. We're choosing extinction, because the Vidrex won't stop at 7 colonies. They'll see us as prey." The debate that followed lasted 7 hours. Arguments were made for every possible option. Some council members advocated for complete surrender. Others wanted immediate military escalation. Most fell somewhere in between. Finally, as the 8th hour approached, Secretary General Afolayan called for a vote. The question before the council was simple but carried weight that would echo across human history. Should humanity activate the Mercy Protocol suspension clause and respond to Vidrex aggression with military force? The vote was 12-3 in favor of military response. Aphelian's voice was heavy as he made the announcement. By authority of the Earth Security Council, the Mercy Protocol is hereby suspended for a period not to exceed 1 standard year. Director Walsh, you have authorization to activate all necessary military assets and respond to the Vedrex threat with appropriate force. Walsh stood at attention. Understood, Mr. Secretary. May I also recommend we contact Ambassador Morrison? He should be informed immediately. Agreed, Aphelian said. And Catherine? Try not to start a war we can't finish. Walsh's smile was grim. Sir, humanity has never fought a war we didn't know how to finish. That's what we've been trying to make everyone forget. On the 5th day after the tribunal's judgment, the Vedrex fleet reached Epsilon 7. Governor Yamamoto had managed to evacuate 32,000 people. 8,000 remained on the surface, either unable to leave or refusing to abandon their homes. The Vedrex warships took up orbital positions. Fleet Commander Zarthul broadcast from his flagship, "Humans of Epsilon 7, your evacuation period has expired. You are ordered to surrender all colony assets and facilities. You will be transported to neutral territory and released." From the planet's surface, Governor Yamamoto responded, "This is Governor Lisa Yamamoto. We reject your authority. This is human sovereign territory. Leave this system immediately." Zarthul's response was delivered with casual certainty. "Your defiance is noted and irrelevant. Vedrex ground forces will land in 1 hour. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." The hour passed in terrible silence. Then the Vedrex landing craft descended, carrying 5,000 soldiers. They were met by 400 colonial security forces armed with light weapons and absolute determination. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it was over, 47 colonial security officers were dead. The remaining Vedrex forces moved into the main settlement. Expecting to find a defeated, terrified population instead, they found evacuation shelters locked down, automated systems destroying data and equipment, and 8,000 civilians who'd activated a protocol that Governor Yamamoto had received from Earth Defense Command 3 days earlier. The protocol was called Scorched Earth, and it was 12,000 years old. By the time the Vedrex soldiers reached the colony's central administration building, every piece of useful infrastructure was slag and smoking rubble. The colonists had destroyed their own homes rather than let the Vedrex take them intact. Fleet Commander Zarthul stared at the reports from the surface in disbelief. They destroyed everything. Their own colony. Everything they built. His tactical officer, a younger Vedrex named Korval, looked equally confused. Why would they do this? The battle was over. We had won. Zarthul didn't have an answer. In Vedrex culture, surrender meant preservation. You lost the battle, but you survived to fight another day. This made no sense. Then his sensors detected something approaching from deeper in the system. Ships. Dozens of them. Moving fast on trajectories that suggested military training. His tactical officer started running analysis. Fleet Commander, we're detecting 47 vessels. They're not colonial transports. The drive signatures are wrong. They're military hulls. Zarthul felt the first stirring of uncertainty. The humans said they had no military fleet. Battle stations. All ships prepare for engagement. The approaching vessels spread out into combat formation. Whatever they were, the pilots knew what they were doing. Zarthul's fleet numbered 300 ships, all of them built for war, all of them crewed by professional soldiers. The human ships kept coming. Then Zarthul received a transmission. The face that appeared on his display was a human woman, middle-aged, wearing a military uniform he didn't recognize. Her eyes were cold in a way that transcended species boundaries. "Fleet Commander Zarthul," she said, "I am Admiral Catherine Chen of the Earth Defense Force. You have invaded human sovereign territory. You have killed 47 civilians and 27 security officers. You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn what happens when humanity stops saying please." When Mercy ends, Admiral Catherine Chen stood on the bridge of the EDF Relentless, studying the tactical displays with the practiced eye of someone who'd spent 40 years preparing for a moment she hoped would never come. The bridge was designed for efficiency rather than comfort, every surface covered in tactical screens and combat information. Her crew numbered 60, all of them veterans of the old Earth Defense Force, all of them recalled from retirement or reserve status when the Mercy Protocol suspension was activated. Chen was 59 years old, Korean-American, with short black hair going gray at the temples. She'd joined Earth's unified military force during the turbulent years before first contact, had commanded ships during the final conflicts between Earth's major powers, and had been present at the ceremony where humanity formally adopted the Mercy Protocol. She'd spent the last 47 years training crews, running simulations, maintaining equipment that everyone hoped would never be used. Now it was being used. Her tactical officer, Commander Marcus Webb, highlighted enemy positions on the holographic display. Fleet Commander Zarthul has 300 warships. Current formation suggests they're preparing for conventional engagement. They're treating us as a standard military threat. Chen allowed herself a small smile. Of course they are. They've studied galactic warfare for centuries. They know exactly how civilized species conduct military operations. They have no idea what we're capable of because we've spent 47 years hiding it. She opened a channel to her fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. Execute Doctrine Delta 7. Remember your training. Remember why we're here. Remember what happened to Epsilon 7. The 47 ships under her command shifted formation, spreading out in a pattern that would have looked chaotic to conventional military doctrine. But Chen wasn't following conventional doctrine. She was following principles developed over thousands of years of human warfare, refined during the bloodiest conflicts Earth had ever seen, and preserved in sealed archives specifically for this moment. Commander Webb watched the tactical display with approval. Delta 7 is active, Admiral. All ships report ready status. Psychological warfare packages are loaded and standing by. Chen studied the Vidrex fleet formation. They'd arranged themselves in a defensive sphere around Epsilon 7. Textbook positioning for holding conquered territory. It was tactically sound by galactic standards. Against humans, it was a mistake. Initiate first phase, Chen ordered. Let's see how they react when their sensors start lying to them. The Relentless and her sister ships began broadcasting on multiple wavelengths using technology that predated first contact. The Vidrex sensors, designed to work within the accepted parameters of galactic technology, began receiving contradictory information. Ships appeared in multiple locations simultaneously. Energy signatures materialized where nothing existed. Combat telemetry became unreliable. On the bridge of the Vidrex flagship Conqueror's Pride, Fleet Commander Zarthul watched his tactical displays dissolve into chaos. What's happening? Report! His sensor officer, a Vidrex named Tarkal, worked frantically at his console. Unknown, Commander. Our sensors are detecting human ships in 17 different locations. But that's impossible. They only have 47 vessels. Zarthul felt anger rising. It was a trick. Electronic warfare. Shut down passive sensors and switch to active scanning. Tarkal complied, activating the fleet's powerful active scanning arrays. The arrays sent out focused beams of various energy types, mapping the space around them through reflection and absorption patterns. It was more expensive in terms of power consumption, but it was also more reliable, for approximately 30 seconds. Then the human ships began reflecting the active scans in ways that shouldn't have been possible, stealth coatings that had been banned by galactic treaty because they were considered unnecessarily deceptive, metamaterials that bent sensor beams around ships entirely, decoys that mimicked active scan reflections perfectly. Commander, Tarkal said, his voice rising with stress, active scanning is also compromised. I can't tell which contacts are real. Zarthul made a decision. Open fire on all contacts. If we destroy everything, we'll destroy them. The Vidrex fleet opened fire, sending thousands of plasma bolts and missile warheads toward every contact their sensors detected. Space lit up with explosions as ordnance found targets, except 90% of the targets were decoys. Empty shells of metal and circuitry that cost the humans almost nothing to produce. The real human ships were somewhere else entirely. Chen watched the Vidrex ammunition expenditure with satisfaction. They're firing blind, she observed. Commander Webb, initiate second phase. Let's give them something real to worry about. The human ships stopped hiding. They appeared on the Vidrex sensors suddenly. 47 clear contacts moving in a pattern that military analysts would later study for decades. They didn't approach the Vidrex fleet directly. Instead, they moved toward the supply ships and support vessels that formed the logistical backbone of any extended military operation. Zarthul saw the danger immediately. All combat ships protect the supply vessels. Don't let them reach our logistics. But the human ships were faster. Much faster. They'd been using only a fraction of their acceleration capability, letting the Vedrex assume they were limited by conventional drive systems. Now they opened up their full thrust, pulling acceleration that would have killed crews without the inertial dampening systems that Earth had perfected during the wars of the early 21st century. The first human ship reached a Vedrex fuel tanker. Instead of destroying it with weapons, the human ship latched onto the tanker with magnetic grapples and fired its drives at full burn, dragging the tanker out of formation and into a trajectory that would take it into deep space. The Vedrex crew, suited in protective gear that allowed them to survive in hard vacuum, evacuated the tanker. The humans let them go, picking them up in escape pods that were immediately jettisoned toward the Vedrex lines. Then the human ship released the tanker and moved to the next target. Within 15 minutes, the Vedrex fleet had lost 8 fuel tankers, 3 ammunition carriers, and 2 mobile repair platforms. The ships weren't destroyed. They were stolen, captured, dragged away from the fleet, and rendered useless. Chen studied the results. Good start. Now let's show them what happens when we stop being gentle. The human fleet regrouped at a distance of 200,000 kilometers from the Vedrex formation. Then they began the third phase, something that Earth military strategists had named the shock and awe doctrine. During the late 20th century, every human ship fired simultaneously, not at the Vedrex warships but at the planet below. Dozens of kinetic impactors, simple hunks of dense metal accelerated to relativistic speeds, streaked down through Epsilon 7's atmosphere. Zarthul watched in horror as the impactors struck the colony sites that his forces had just occupied. The explosions were massive, precise, devastating. Every Vedrex ground installation was obliterated in seconds. The 5,000 Vedrex soldiers on the surface never had time to react. "You're bombing your own planet," Zarthul broadcast on all channels. "You're destroying your own colony." Admiral Chen's response was calm and cold. "Fleet Commander, you already destroyed our colony. We're just making sure you can't use what's left. This is war. This is what humans do in war. We don't fight with honor. We don't give you fair chances. We fight to win." Zarthul felt something he'd never experienced in 40 years of military service. Fear. Not for himself, but for his fleet, his crews, his people. These humans fought like nothing he'd ever encountered. They ignored conventions. They weaponized everything. They showed no hesitation in sacrificing their own assets if it meant damaging their enemy. He opened a secure channel to Vedrex High Command. "This is Fleet Commander Zarthul. Situation critical. The humans are not what we believed. Request immediate reinforcement." The response took several minutes. Zarthul recognized the voice of Supreme Commander Draktor, leader of all Vedrex military forces. "Fleet Commander, your message is concerning. Elaborate on the human capabilities." Zarthul struggled to find words. "They fight without honor, Supreme Commander. They use deception, electronic warfare, psychological attacks. They sacrifice their own assets without hesitation. They don't follow conventional military doctrine. It's as if they've studied every possible way to hurt an enemy and implemented all of them simultaneously." There was a pause. Draktor's voice carried an edge when he responded. "You command 300 warships against 47 human vessels and you're requesting reinforcement?" Zarthul watched his tactical display as another supply ship was captured. "Supreme Commander, ship count is irrelevant. These humans are not fighting a conventional battle. They're systematically destroying our ability to maintain this fleet in hostile space. Without supplies, without ammunition, without fuel, my 300 ships become 300 coffins." Another pause, longer this time. "Hold position, Fleet Commander. The Emperor is dispatching the Home Guard fleet to your location. 200 additional warships. They will arrive in 4 standard days." Zarthul felt a mix of relief and dread. 4 days was a long time to hold against an enemy like this. "Understood, Supreme Commander. We will hold." The transmission ended. Zarthul turned to his tactical officer. "All ships, defensive formation. Priority on protecting remaining logistics vessels. We hold for 4 days." Across the tactical net, his fleet acknowledged the orders and began repositioning. They formed a tight sphere. Warships surrounding the remaining supply vessels, weapons pointing outward in all directions. It was the safest conventional formation possible. Against humans, it was exactly what Admiral Chen wanted them to do. On the bridge of the Relentless, Commander Webb highlighted the new Vedrex formation. They've clustered defensively, all ships protecting their logistics core. Chen nodded. Perfect. They're thinking defensively now. Thinking about preservation instead of conquest. Commander, deploy the autonomous systems. Webb touched several controls. Understood, Admiral. Releasing drone packages. From each of the 47 human ships, cargo bays opened and released what looked like small spheres, each about 2 meters in diameter. The spheres drifted away from the human fleet, seemingly inert. Then they activated. The spheres were autonomous combat drones, technology that Earth had developed during the mid-21st century and had refined continuously ever since. Each drone carried its own power source, its own sensors, its own targeting systems, and enough weapons to threaten capital ships. More importantly, each drone carried artificial intelligence capable of tactical decision-making. The Vedrex fleet watched as 2,000 drones spread out in a cloud, forming a sphere that completely surrounded them. The drones didn't attack immediately. They just waited, hanging in space like predators studying prey. Zarthul stared at the tactical display. What are those? Tarkal ran analysis. Unknown, Commander. They appear to be autonomous weapons platforms. Small, highly mobile, armed with plasma cutters and shaped charge warheads. How many? Tarkal rechecked his sensors. Approximately 2,000, Commander. Zarthul did the mathematics quickly. 2,000 drones against 300 ships. Even if each drone could only damage one ship, they were outnumbered nearly 7 to 1. Prioritize point defense. Destroy them before they can attack. The Vedrex fleet opened fire with their point defense systems, high rate of fire weapons designed to intercept incoming missiles and fighters. They destroyed 200 drones in the first 30 seconds. The remaining 1,800 drones attacked. They didn't attack in waves. They didn't follow predictable patterns. Each drone operated independently, using its AI to identify the optimal target and approach vector. They came from every direction simultaneously, moving with acceleration that pushed the limits of their structural integrity. The Vedrex point defense systems, designed to protect against conventional missiles and fighters, couldn't keep up. The drones were too small, too fast, too unpredictable. They slipped through the defensive fire and reached the Vedrex ships. Instead of detonating immediately, the drones attached themselves to hulls like metallic parasites. They used plasma cutters to bore through armor, shaped charges to breach critical systems. They targeted engines, weapons, sensors, life support. Damage reports flooded Zarthul's command center. Ship after ship reported critical malfunctions, not destroyed but crippled, unable to maneuver, unable to fight effectively. Within an hour, 80 Vedrex ships were disabled. The drones had done their job and self-destructed, preventing the Vedrex from recovering and analyzing the technology. Zarthul sent another message to High Command. Supreme Commander, we have sustained critical damage. 80 ships disabled by autonomous weapons. Request permission to withdraw from this system. The response was immediate and harsh. Negative, Fleet Commander. You will hold position. The Emperor has committed the Home Guard. To withdraw now would be to admit defeat to a species we outnumber. Hold for 3 more days. Zarthul looked at his tactical display. 3 more days. He had 220 functional ships left. The humans had lost none. 3 more days. Admiral Chen received the reports from her drone deployment with satisfaction. 80 disabled. No losses on our side. They're learning, but they're learning too slowly. Commander Webb studied the Vedrex formation. They're not withdrawing. They're staying put, probably waiting for reinforcement. Chen pulled up intelligence reports. According to signals intercept, the Vedrex are sending their Home Guard fleet. The Emperor's personal forces. 200 additional warships crewed by their best soldiers. Webb looked concerned. That's 500 total ships against our 47, Admiral. Even with our advantages, those aren't good odds. Chen smiled grimly. Then it's a good thing we're not fighting them with 47 ships. Commander, contact Earth Defense Command. Tell them to release the reserve fleet. It's time to show the galaxy what humanity built while we were saying please. The message was sent via quantum-encrypted channel, traveling instantly across light years. On Earth, in the command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Director Catherine Walsh received the request and smiled. Finally, she said, activate the reserve fleet. All ships, all crews. This is what we've been preparing for. Across human space and hidden facilities on dozens of worlds, ancient systems came to life. Shipyards that had been sealed for nearly 5 decades opened their doors. Crews that had trained in simulation for their entire careers finally boarded real ships. Weapons that had been locked away since before first contact were loaded and armed. The reserve fleet was 20 times larger than what the galaxy had ever seen from humanity. 2,000 warships ranging from fast attack corvettes to massive battle carriers, ships designed using principles that predated galactic civilization, built with technology that humans had developed in isolation. They'd been hidden, maintained, ready for the moment when humanity needed them. That moment had arrived. Admiral Chen watched as the first reserve fleet ships began arriving at Epsilon 7, jumping into the system in formations that spoke of intensive training and preparation. Within 6 hours, she commanded not 47 ships but 900. She opened a channel to Fleet Commander Zarthul. "Commander, I'm going to give you one chance to withdraw. Take your fleet and leave this system. We'll allow you to recover your disabled ships and return to Vidrex space. This is your only opportunity." Zarthul looked at his tactical display. The humans had gone from 47 ships to 900. 900? Where had they come from? How had they hidden such a massive fleet? It didn't matter. The Emperor had committed the Home Guard. To retreat now would be personal dishonor and species-wide humiliation. "We do not withdraw," Zarthul transmitted. "We await reinforcement and will drive you from this system." Chen nodded as if she'd expected the answer. "Very well, Commander. When your reinforcements arrive, they will find a battlefield, not a victory." She closed the channel and turned to her tactical staff. "The Vidrex are committed to this course. They're going to bring their best forces here. We're going to show them exactly what happens when you make humanity angry." Commander Webb brought up fleet deployment options. "What are your orders, Admiral?" Chen studied the system map, thinking about the Vidrex Home Guard fleet that was coming, thinking about the 300,000 human colonists who'd been forced to evacuate their homes, thinking about the 74 people who'd died on Epsilon 7. "We turn this system into a killing ground," she said. "We teach the Vidrex and through them the entire galaxy why humanity says please, why we negotiate, why we compromise. We teach them what we're capable of when those options are taken away." Over the next 3 days, Admiral Chen transformed the Epsilon 7 system into something unprecedented in modern galactic warfare. The human fleet didn't sit idle, waiting for the Vidrex reinforcements. They prepared. Autonomous weapons platforms were seated throughout the system, hidden among asteroids and debris fields. Missile pods were positioned at key strategic points. Communications jammers were deployed to disrupt enemy coordination. Sensors grids were established to track every ship in the system. But the preparations went beyond simple military deployment. Chen authorized the use of psychological warfare tactics that had been developed and refined during Earth's most brutal conflicts. The human ships began broadcasting on Vidrex communications channels. Not threats, but something worse. Information. They broadcast the casualty reports from the Vidrex forces on Epsilon 7. 5,000 soldiers killed in the kinetic bombardment. They broadcast recordings of Vidrex communications during the drone attack, letting the Vidrex fleet hear the panic and confusion of their own comrades. They broadcast tactical analysis showing exactly how outmatched the Vidrex were. Zarthul tried to filter the broadcasts, but his crew had already heard them. Morale, which had been absolute at the beginning of the campaign, began to crack. The Vidrex were warriors, trained from youth to face death without fear, but there was a difference between honorable death in combat and systematic dismantling by an enemy that seemed to anticipate every move. On the 3rd day, the Vidrex Home Guard fleet arrived. 200 ships, the finest in the Vidrex military, crewed by soldiers who had never known defeat. They jumped into the Epsilon 7 system in perfect formation, ready to crush the human resistance and restore Vidrex honor. They jumped directly into Admiral Chen's trap. The autonomous weapons platforms activated simultaneously. Thousands of missiles launched from concealed positions. The communication jammers engaged, cutting the Home Guard fleet off from each other and from Zarthul's forces. The sensor grids fed targeting data to every human ship. The Home Guard fleet never had a chance to form up. They were immediately scattered, isolated, fighting individual battles against an enemy that had complete battlefield awareness. Within the first 10 minutes, 23 Home Guard ships were destroyed or disabled. Admiral Chen broadcast to both Vidrex fleets. Fleet Commander Zarthul, Home Guard Commander. You can surrender now. Power down your weapons. We'll escort you back to Vidrex space. No more of your people need to die. The response came not from Zarthul but from the Home Guard commander of Vidrex named Supreme Admiral Carthex. Human Admiral, we are the Emperor's chosen. We do not surrender. We fight until victory or death. Chen had expected that response. She'd read the Vidrex cultural files. She understood their warrior ethos, their commitment to honor. She also understood that sometimes you had to break that ethos to save lives. Very well, she said. Then we'll show you what defeat looks like. The price of hubris. The battle for Epsilon 7 lasted 14 hours and became known across the galaxy as the moment when humanity revealed its true nature. Admiral Chen didn't simply defeat the Vidrex forces. She dismantled them systematically, using tactics and technologies that shocked observers from every species. The autonomous drones didn't just disable ships, they boarded them. Small spider-like machines that could navigate through breached hulls and disable life support systems without destroying the ship itself. It was psychological warfare on a visceral level. The Vidrex crews found themselves fighting against enemies that didn't fear death because they weren't alive. The human ships demonstrated capabilities that shouldn't have existed, stealth systems that made them invisible to sensors, jump drives that could micro-jump within a single system, appearing and disappearing across the battlefield. Weapons that didn't just destroy but disrupted, disabled and demoralized. By the 8th hour, Supreme Admiral Carthex was dead, his flagship torn apart by concentrated missile fire after it became isolated from the rest of his fleet. By the 10th hour, half the Vidrex combined fleet was destroyed or disabled. By the 12th hour, Fleet Commander Zarthul finally sent the message that Admiral Chen had been waiting for. Human Admiral, this is Fleet Commander Zarthul. I request terms of surrender. Chen stood on the bridge of the Relentless, looking at the tactical display that showed the remains of what had been 500 Vidrex warships. She felt no satisfaction in the victory, only sadness that it had been necessary. Fleet Commander, she responded. Power down all weapon systems. Eject your antimatter cores and disable your jump drives. We will board your remaining ships and provide medical assistance to your wounded. Your surviving crews will be treated as prisoners of war under the rules established by the Galactic Convention on Armed Conflict. There was a pause. Then Zarthul's voice, defeated and tired. Understood, Admiral. We comply. Across the battlefield, the surviving Vidrex ships began powering down. Human boarding parties, equipped with medical supplies and translation systems, began the process of securing and stabilizing the captured vessels. Admiral Chen opened a channel to Earth Defense Command. Director Walsh, this is Admiral Chen. Epsilon 7 is secured. Vidrex fleet neutralized. Requesting instructions for next phase. Director Catherine Walsh appeared on the holographic display. Her expression was controlled, but Chen could see the strain of the past 2 weeks. Outstanding work, Admiral. The Security Council is convening to determine our strategic posture going forward. Stand by for orders. The connection terminated. Chen turned to Commander Webb. Status report on our forces? Webb consulted his displays. 12 ships damaged, none destroyed. Casualties are minimal. 73 personnel wounded, 8 killed. The Vidrex lost approximately 380 ships destroyed and 120 captured or disabled. Estimated casualties on their side are around $190,000. Chen felt the weight of those numbers. Nearly 200,000 Vidrex killed because their leaders had refused to listen to warnings, because they'd mistaken human restraint for weakness. Make sure our medical teams do everything possible for the Vidrex wounded, Chen ordered. They're prisoners now, not enemies. They deserve to be treated with dignity. While Admiral Chen was securing Epsilon 7, events were moving rapidly across the galaxy. The battle had been broadcast by automated systems to every major government and news organization. Within hours, every species in galactic civilization knew what had happened. The reaction was immediate and shocked. On the Thessian homeworld, Crystalline Council members gathered in emergency session. We have observed warfare for 4,000 years. Nothing prepared us for this. The humans didn't just defeat the Vidrex, they humiliated them. The Mixari Collective, a species of telepathic beings who rarely involve themselves in military matters, sent a delegation to Earth. We wish to understand. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that exceed any known military force. Yet, for 47 years, you presented yourselves as peaceful, almost passive. Why? Ambassador James Morrison, still stationed at the Galactic Tribunal, found himself giving the same explanation repeatedly. We were peaceful because we chose to be. The Mercy Protocol was our gift to ourselves and to the galaxy. It was our way of saying that we could be better than our history. But it was always conditional on other species respecting our choices. The Vidrex didn't respect our choices. They forced us to remember what we were. In Vidrex space, the reaction was one of stunned disbelief. The Vidrex Collective had been a military power for 800 years. They had fought and won dozens of conflicts. They had never been defeated so thoroughly, so completely. Emperor Krelthar, ruler of the Vidrex Collective, received the news of the disaster in his throne chamber. He was a massive specimen even by Vidrex standards, standing nearly 4 meters tall with scales that had darkened to pure black with age. He had ruled for 60 years and had overseen the expansion of Vidrex territory across 14 star systems. Now he faced the possibility of losing everything. His chief advisor, an old Vidrex named Mordan who had served 3 emperors, spoke carefully. "Your Majesty, we must respond to this defeat. The humans have demonstrated overwhelming military superiority. If we do not act decisively, other species will see us as weak." Krelthar's claws scraped against the metal armrests of his throne. "What do you suggest, Mordan? Should I send more fleets to be destroyed? Should I sacrifice more of our people to satisfy honor?" Mordan was silent for a moment. "Your Majesty, perhaps it is time to negotiate. The humans have shown they can destroy us. Perhaps they will show mercy if we acknowledge our error." Krelthar stood, his massive form dominating the throne room. "Mercy. We showed them no mercy when we claimed their colonies. We laughed at their warnings. We called them weak." He moved to a window that looked out over the Vidrex capital city. Millions of Vidrex went about their daily lives, unaware that their civilization stood at a precipice. "Contact the human ambassador," Krelthar said. "Tell him the Emperor wishes to negotiate directly." The message reached Ambassador Morrison within an hour. He conferred with Director Walsh and Secretary General Afalayan before responding. The consensus was clear. This was an opportunity to end the conflict before it escalated further. 2 days later, a meeting was arranged. Not at the Galactic Tribunal, but in neutral space. A small station maintained by the Thessian Collective specifically for sensitive diplomatic negotiations. Ambassador Morrison arrived with a small team. Sarah Okonkwo accompanied him, along with 2 security personnel and a military liaison. They were met by Emperor Krelthar himself, accompanied by Mordan and a minimal guard force. The 2 parties faced each other across a conference table designed for multiple species. The atmosphere was tense. Krelthar spoke first, his voice carrying the weight of someone unaccustomed to admitting error. "Ambassador Morrison, I have requested this meeting to discuss terms. The Vidrex Collective acknowledges that we underestimated humanity. We seek to avoid further conflict." Morrison studied the Vidrex Emperor carefully. "Your Majesty, humanity has no desire to prolong this war. We defended ourselves because we had to. We would prefer to return to peaceful relations." Krelthar's scales shifted color slightly, a sign of emotional stress. "What are your terms?" Morrison had spent days working on this with Earth's leadership. The terms were designed to be firm but not vindictive. Complete withdrawal of Vidrex forces from all human territories, recognition of human sovereignty over the Outer Rim colonies, reparations for damages to Epsilon 7 and compensation for the families of those killed, and establishment of a permanent communication channel to prevent future misunderstandings. Krelthar listened to each term. When Morrison finished, the Emperor was quiet for a long moment. "These terms are acceptable. What guarantees do we have that humanity will not seek further retribution?" Morrison pulled up a document on his portable display. "Your Majesty, humanity is reactivating the Mercy Protocol. We're returning to our policy of restraint and diplomacy, but with one modification. A permanent clause that allows us to respond militarily to direct threats without requiring Security Council approval." He paused, making sure the Emperor understood. "We're choosing peace again, Your Majesty, but we're making it clear that peace is a choice we make, not a limitation we suffer under. Any species that threatens human lives or territory will face the full capabilities we demonstrated at Epsilon 7. Krelthar nodded slowly. "I understand, Ambassador. You say please, but you keep your weapons close." "Exactly," Morrison said. "We learned from this conflict too, Your Majesty. We learned that hiding our capabilities completely can be as dangerous as using them recklessly. From now on, the galaxy will know what humanity is capable of, and they'll know that when we say please, it's not begging, it's a warning. The formal treaty was signed 2 weeks later. The Vidrex Collective withdrew from all claimed human territories. They paid substantial reparations. More importantly, they spread the word across the galaxy about what had happened at Epsilon 7. Other species took note. Several governments that had been considering territorial claims against human space quietly abandoned those plans. Trade agreements that had been unfavorable to humanity were renegotiated on more equitable terms. Humanity's voice in the Galactic Council carried more weight, but the most significant change was internal to humanity itself. The Mercy Protocol was reactivated but modified. Earth maintained a standing military force of 500 ships, enough to defend human space without requiring a massive mobilization. Military training became standard for all civilians. Defense installations were no longer hidden but openly displayed. Humanity had learned the lesson that military strength and peaceful intentions were not contradictory. They could be both strong and restrained, both capable and compassionate. 6 months after the Battle of Epsilon 7, Ambassador Morrison stood before the Galactic Tribunal once more. This time, he wasn't defending human colonies or warning aggressors. He was presenting humanity's new diplomatic doctrine. Members of the tribunal, Morrison began. The events of recent months have forced humanity to confront a difficult truth. For 47 years, we believed that demonstrating weakness would prevent conflict. We were wrong. Our restraint was interpreted as inability. Our desire for peace was seen as fear. He looked around the chamber, making eye contact with representatives from dozens of species. We have learned from this. Humanity will continue to seek peaceful resolutions to conflicts. We will continue to negotiate in good faith. We will continue to say please, but we will do so from a position of demonstrated strength, not assumed weakness. The Thessian arbiter's facets rotated with interest. Ambassador Morrison, are you suggesting that humanity will maintain its enhanced military posture permanently? Morrison nodded. Yes, Arbiter. We're not hiding what we're capable of anymore. Every species in this chamber now knows that humanity possesses military technology and tactical doctrine that exceeds galactic standards. They know we're willing to use those capabilities to defend our people and our interests. But, and this is crucial, he continued, they also know that we prefer not to use them. The Mercy Protocol remains in effect. We will still negotiate. We will still compromise. We will still seek peaceful solutions. But those diplomatic efforts will no longer be mistaken for weakness. A representative from the Mixari Collective, speaking through a telepathic translator, posed a question. Ambassador, does humanity seek to dominate the galaxy through this military superiority? Morrison shook his head firmly. No, humanity has no imperial ambitions. We don't want to rule other species or claim their territories. We simply want to live in peace, to grow, to explore, to trade. But we want to do so without constantly having to defend our right to exist. He paused, then added, the Mercy Protocol was never about making ourselves weak. It was about choosing not to use our strength unnecessarily. That choice remains in effect, but now everyone understands it's a choice. The tribunal session lasted several more hours. Questions were asked and answered. Concerns were addressed. Treaties were modified to reflect the new reality of human capabilities. When it was over, Ambassador Morrison returned to his office. Sarah Okonkwo joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Morrison and sat down with a sigh of relief. Think they got the message? She asked. Morrison sipped his coffee and nodded. I think so. We spent 47 years proving we could be peaceful. We spent 2 weeks proving we could be dangerous. Now maybe we can spend the next few decades being both. Sarah smiled slightly. The old saying about speaking softly and carrying a big stick? Morrison chuckled. Something like that. Though I think we've upgraded from sticks to plasma cannons and autonomous drone swarms. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars through the viewport. Somewhere out there, Admiral Chen was overseeing the reconstruction of Epsilon 7. The colony was being rebuilt, stronger and better protected than before. The colonists who had evacuated were returning home. Sarah broke the silence. Do you think this will last, Jim? This balance we're trying to strike? Morrison considered the question carefully. I don't know. But I know we have to try. We can't go back to being the species we were before first contact. Too much violence, too much war, but we also can't pretend that violence doesn't exist, or that other species will always respect our peaceful intentions. He set down his coffee cup and turned to face her directly. The Mercy Protocol was always about choice, Sarah. About choosing to be better than our history. That hasn't changed. What's changed is that now everyone understands we're choosing peace, not accepting it as the only option we have. Across the galaxy, in governments and military headquarters, in universities and research stations, the same conversations were happening. Species were reassessing their understanding of humanity. Old assumptions were being discarded. New strategies were being developed. The Vidrex Collective, humbled by defeat but not destroyed, began a period of internal reform. Emperor Krelthar, recognizing that the old ways of expansion and conquest were no longer viable, initiated programs to strengthen Vidrex economic and cultural influence, rather than military dominance. Other aggressive species took note and moderated their own expansionist policies. The galaxy became, paradoxically, more peaceful because one species had demonstrated overwhelming capacity for violence. In Earth's command bunker, Director Walsh held a final meeting with her senior staff. They were discussing the deactivation of some emergency protocols now that the immediate crisis had passed. Admiral Chen, attending via holographic link from Epsilon 7, raised a concern. Director, are we certain we want to deactivate all the emergency protocols? We've seen what happens when we're unprepared. Walsh nodded. That's a valid concern, Admiral, which is why we're not deactivating all of them. The Modified Mercy Protocol keeps substantial military capabilities active and ready, but we are deactivating the protocols that were designed for total war scenarios. Humanity doesn't need to be on a full war footing to maintain security. She looked around at the faces on the various displays. The goal, as it always was, is balance. Enough strength to defend ourselves. Enough restraint to remain the kind of species we want to be. Enough transparency so that no one mistakes our restraint for inability. Commander Webb, also on the call, asked the question many were thinking. Do you think we'll have to do this again? Face another species that doesn't take our warnings seriously? Walsh was quiet for a moment. I hope not, but I suspect that every few generations someone will test us. Someone will see our peaceful behavior and think we're weak. And we'll have to remind them, carefully but firmly, that peace is a choice we make. She smiled slightly. At least now we have the example of the Vidrex. Every species knows what happened at Epsilon 7. That knowledge should buy us decades of peace. The meeting concluded. Walsh sat alone in her office afterward, thinking about the path humanity had traveled. From a divided species that almost destroyed itself with nuclear weapons, to a unified civilization that chose restraint and diplomacy, to a military power that used that power to defend rather than conquer. It wasn't a perfect solution. Nothing ever was. But it was humanity trying to be better than its history, while acknowledging that history's lessons. 10 years after the Battle of Epsilon 7, Ambassador Morrison retired from diplomatic service. He was 78 years old and had spent 30 years navigating the complexities of galactic politics. At his retirement ceremony, attended by representatives from dozens of species including a Vidrex delegation led by Emperor Krelthar himself, Morrison gave a speech that would be remembered and quoted for generations. When I began my career, he said, I believed that humanity's greatest strength was our adaptability, our ability to change, to grow, to become something different than we'd been. The Mercy Protocol was the ultimate expression of that belief. We chose to change our nature, or so we thought. He paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. But what happened with the Vidrex taught us something crucial. We didn't change our nature. We chose to restrain it. And there's a profound difference between those two things. Morrison continued, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. Humanity is still the species that fought brutal wars for thousands of years. We're still the species that weaponized everything we touched. We're still capable of terrible violence, but we're also the species that chose to step back from that violence, that built the Mercy Protocol and lived by it for nearly 50 years. Both of those things are true. Both define who we are. We're not peaceful because we're weak. We're peaceful because we're strong enough to choose peace. He looked directly at Emperor Krelthar, and when that choice is taken away from us when we're forced to defend ourselves, the galaxy sees what we're capable of. Not because we want to demonstrate our power, but because we have no other option. Morrison concluded with words that would become humanity's unofficial motto in galactic affairs. We say please because we remember what happens when we stop. We negotiate because we know the alternatives. We seek peace because we understand the true cost of war. That's not weakness. That's wisdom bought with 10,000 years of blood. The ceremony ended with standing ovations from representatives of 73 species. The Vedrex delegation approached Morrison afterward. Emperor Krelthar, older now but still imposing, extended one of his massive clawed hands in the human gesture of respect he'd learned. Ambassador Morrison, the Emperor said, you tried to warn us. We did not listen. I am grateful that humanity showed restraint even in victory. A lesser species would have sought revenge. Morrison shook the Emperor's hand carefully, mindful of the strength in those claws. Your Majesty, revenge serves no purpose. We didn't fight the Vedrex to punish you. We fought to defend our people. Once that goal was achieved, continuing violence would have been pointless. Krelthar nodded slowly. This is the wisdom you spoke of. The Vedrex are learning it, though the lesson came at great cost. Our children now study human history in our academies. They learn about your wars, your weapons, your capacity for destruction, and they learn about the Mercy Protocol, about your choice to restrain that capacity. He paused, then added, it is a lesson every species should learn. Power without restraint is tyranny, but restraint without power is vulnerability. Humanity has found the balance. As the years passed, the events at Epsilon 7 became part of galactic common knowledge. Children across hundreds of worlds learned about the Battle of Epsilon 7 in their history classes. Military academies studied Admiral Chen's tactics. Diplomatic schools analyzed Ambassador Morrison's negotiations. But the most important lesson, the one that shaped galactic politics for generations, was simpler. When humanity said please, it meant something. It meant that humanity was choosing peace over conflict, restraint over violence, diplomacy over war, and that choice deserved respect because everyone now knew what humanity was capable of when that choice was taken away. The Mercy Protocol remained in effect, modified, but intact. Humanity maintained its military capabilities openly. The fleet that had been hidden for nearly 50 years remained visible and active. A reminder and a deterrent, but more importantly, humanity remained committed to the principles that had led to the Mercy Protocol's creation. The belief that intelligent species could coexist without constant conflict. The hope that understanding could prevent war. The conviction that choosing peace was a sign of strength, not weakness. Epsilon 7 was rebuilt and prospered. A memorial was constructed at the site where 74 colonists had died defending their home. The memorial bore a simple inscription that captured both humanity's capacity for violence and commitment to peace. They died so we could say, please again. And across the galaxy, from the core worlds to the frontier colonies, humanity continued to say please. But now everyone understood what that word really meant. It wasn't begging. It wasn't weakness. It was a warning, a gift, and a choice. The choice to be better than history. The choice to seek peace before war. The choice to remember what they were capable of while hoping they'd never need to demonstrate it again. Humanity had learned to carry both the weight of their violent past and the hope of a peaceful future. They'd learned that true strength wasn't just the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to choose not to. And they'd taught the galaxy that when someone powerful says please, the wise listen, because the alternative, as the Vedrex had learned, was to discover exactly why they'd been saying please in the first place.